Good evening, you're watching the news from the Sultanate of Oman television. First, the headlines. The Palestinian presidency expressed its rejection and condemnation of the decisions approved by the Israeli cabinet regarding the occupation of the entire Gaza Strip. Martyrs and wounded in the Israeli army's bombing of various areas in the Gaza Strip, and the United Nations confirms that the Strip witnessed the highest rate of acute malnutrition last July. And the French president reaffirms his country's support for a ceasefire in Ukraine. Welcome to our news center. Those were the headlines, and now for the news in detail. His Majesty Sultan Haytham bin Tariq has sent a cable of greetings to His Excellency President Tharman Shanmugaratnam of the Republic of Singapore on the occasion of his country's National Day. Israel said early today it plans to take over the city of Gaza. The decision, made after a late-night meeting of the top officials, drew Palestinian rejection, fueled with mounting international calls to end the war, and provoked worries in Israel over the fate of the hostages still held by Hamas, a major ground operation that could displace tens of thousands of people and further disrupt efforts to deliver food to the hunger-stricken territory. The Palestinian presidency expressed its rejection and condemnation of the decisions approved by the Israeli cabinet regarding the occupation of the entire Gaza Strip and the forced displacement of nearly 1 million Palestinians from Gaza City and the northern Gaza Strip to the south. The Palestinian presidency called for a coordinated, unified Arab, Islamic and international stance to ensure the protection of the Palestinian people and the cessation of aggression. It also called on the international community and the United Nations to take immediate action to allow urgent humanitarian aid and fuel into the Gaza Strip without any restrictions or conditions. The United Nations today called for Israel's plan to take over Gaza City to be immediately halted. Regarding this development, Liz Throssell, spokesperson for the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, had this to say.
UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk says the Israeli government's plan for a complete military takeover of the occupied Gaza Strip must be immediately halted. This runs contrary to the ruling of the International Court of Justice that Israel must bring its occupation to an end as soon as possible, to the realization of the agreed two-state solution, and to the right of Palestinians to self-determination. On all evidence to date, this further escalation will result in more massive forced displacement, more killing, more unbearable suffering, senseless destruction and atrocity crimes. The war in Gaza must end now, and Israelis and Palestinians must be allowed to live side by side in peace. Instead of intensifying this war, the Israeli government should put all its efforts into saving the lives of Gaza civilians by allowing the full, unfettered flow of humanitarian aid. The hostages must be immediately and unconditionally released by Palestinian armed groups. Palestinians arbitrarily detained by Israel must also be immediately and unconditionally released.
In another escalation on ground in Gaza, 6 Palestinians were killed and others injured, including 3 aid recipients today, as a result of Israeli shelling and gunfire in several areas of the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian news agency reported that 3 Palestinians were killed and others injured when the occupation forces targeted people waiting for aid in the central Gaza Strip. It added that a Palestinian man and his wife were killed in an Israeli airstrike east of Khan Yunis, south of the Gaza Strip. It also reported that a Palestinian man was killed and others wounded when Israeli aircraft targeted a group of Palestinians in a Tufah neighborhood northeast of Gaza City. Meanwhile, foreign nations continued airdropping aid in Gaza, signaling that about 2 million people in this strip depend on humanitarian aid to survive. Israel implemented a total blockade on aid trucks entering the strip in early March and began allowing aid back in May, although humanitarian organizations say the amount remains far from adequate. UN Secretary-General spokesperson Farhan Haq said during a press briefing that any expansions of the conflict in Gaza will be a catastrophic. Haq further stated that
we've already made clear the fact that the occupation of the occupied territories cannot and must not continue. It is not accepted under international law. Regarding the comments, we'll have to see what actions the government takes, and we will respond accordingly. But we've already made clear our concerns that any expansion of the conflict will be catastrophic. We'll have to see what actually happens, but we stand firmly against any escalation of the conflict. As you know, it's already been extremely ruinous. You've had more than 60,000 casualties from this conflict just over the past nearly 2 years as it is. And there's the prospect of huge levels of humanitarian suffering, including potential starvations that could worsen if the conflict gets worse. So certainly what we are trying to do is provide the needed humanitarian aid, but that would become much more difficult if there's an expanded conflict.
And just as a
French President Emmanuel Macron yesterday reaffirmed France's full support for a ceasefire in Ukraine and the launch of talks aimed at reaching a lasting and solid peace following a long discussion with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and other European leaders. Emmanuel Macron reiterated to the Ukrainian president France's full support for establishing a ceasefire and launching discussions towards a solid and lasting solution that preserves Ukraine's legitimate rights and guarantees its security and that of the Europeans. At least 3 people were injured in Kharkiv and Sumy cities in Ukraine after Russian drone attacks. Emergency services were seen in Kharkiv and Sumy dousing flames and clearing rubble following these strikes. The State Emergency Service of Ukraine reported today that it had managed to contain a fire that broke out at a 4-story building in Kharkiv. The strike came after U.S. President Donald Trump said he would meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The war has killed tens of thousands of troops on both sides and more than 12,000 Ukrainian civilians, according to the United Nations. On the local front, the Omani Student Society of Victoria in Australia organised a workshop in Melbourne aimed at enhancing students' understanding of modern media practices. The event focused on the changing landscape of journalism and the skills needed to engage with today's digital media environment. Here is more in this report.
To support Omani students and bridging academic learning with practical skills, the Omani Student Society of Victoria, OSSV, organized a workshop in Melbourne on modern media practices. The event focused on developments in news-making, digital communication, and the challenging media landscape.
Through our collaboration with PAX Institute, we aim to enhance media quality and develop the media skills of members of the Omani Student Society of Victoria in Australia. This workshop has helped us better understand the role and impact of media in today's world.
The session covered key topics such as digital publishing, media ethics, and current broadcasting techniques. Students also explored content creation and the challenges of working in today's fast-moving environment.
I'm happy and glad to attend this workshop The most interesting part was learning about the history of media and how it all began. Additionally, I gained valuable insights on how to create effective and successful media content, which is super beneficial for me as a content creator.
I found the workshop extremely interesting and educational about the history of media and news, and I really enjoyed the discussion around why and how people seek out news and how it reaches them. This discussion deepened my understanding of bias, journalistic integrity.
The initiative is part of OSSV's broader efforts to promote student growth through learning opportunities that align with global media trends and industry standards. Reporting for the Sultanate of Oman Television, this is Saleh bin Khalfan al-Rahbi.
The Royal Navy of Oman's vessel Shabab Oman 2 won the 2025 International Friendship Cup for tall sailing ships for the fifth time within the closing ceremony of the tall ships race in Eastberg, Kingdom of Denmark, in recognition of principles of values of cooperation, cultural exchange, tolerance, building understanding bridges with nations. The vessel Shabab Oman 2 was crowned with the cup due to the efforts exerted by the crew of the ship in introducing the civilizational image and humane message of the Sultanate of Oman to the world. The final ceremony witnessed various sports competitions and marches by the crews of the participating vessels, which highlighted the cultural variety. The ship opens its doors for the visitors to observe the Omani heritage and see antiquities. This is the Sultanate of Oman Television, and before we end tonight's news bulletin, here are the main points once again. The Palestinian presidency expressed its rejection and condemnation of the decisions approved by the Israeli cabinet regarding the occupation of the entire Gaza Strip. Martyrs and wounded in the Israeli army's bombing of various areas in the Gaza Strip, and the United Nations confirms that the Strip witnessed the highest rate of acute malnutrition last July. And the French president reaffirms his country's support for a ceasefire in Ukraine. With that, we do come to the end of tonight's news bulletin. From all of us here at the newsroom and the studios, it is good night, stay safe, and enjoy your weekend.